And the first of the year, if you want to have the allegiance and pledge and a prayer, we'll do it. Just, I've not been neglecting of it. I just haven't thought about it until right now. So, Rob, if you would, if you'd get us started on the agenda items, please.
The first thing I put on the agenda is the draft of the budget guidelines, calendar and forms. Almost everything in this budget packet is the same as the last 2 years, with the exception of the calendar, which it'll change, obviously, and possibly the guidelines. I feel like the most important task for this committee is establishing strong guidelines and about what you're looking for in next year's budget. I kind of feel like maybe last year we didn't really set a lot of guidelines, and that could have been what got us off. I mean, that's what maybe caused such a long budget season, and we had a lot to work with at first. But, I mean, I can read through this, the objective, the guidelines, the budget process, or we can get straight to it if you'd like, since I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with most of this.
What's the pleasure of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Robbie, one of the issues that I think we've had in the past that sticks out in my mind, and I love the fact that we have a calendar, we have guidelines, department heads know the process that we're going to follow, and I think you're exactly right. I think we probably need to be a little more strict with adhering to those guidelines. But one of the items that always confused some of the department heads that I heard from was, at one point, we had said, department heads do not include capital outlay in your budget proposals and/or salary increases. But yet, somehow or another, every now and then, some department head would wind up submitting it into their budget, and then we would be up here debating, Mr. Chairman, on what we're going to pass, what we're not going to pass. And then some capital outlays would get passed in an overall budget that we approved to send on to full commission, and then others didn't get their capital outlay in their budget, so they're wanting to do it separate. So if we could have a clear, strict understanding of department heads needing to separate capital outlay and not put it in their budget, separating salary increases, not putting it in their budget, I would love to hear that right now, and I would love for this committee to hold true to that throughout the entire upcoming budget process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to follow up on that, saying, that we rewarded some in the past because even though they were told not to put raises in the thing, some did put the raises in, we rewarded them with the raises. And then when somebody came back and wanted raises, we said, well, why didn't you put that in there? Well, we originally told them not to. So, I mean, we gave them very, very conflicting information and didn't follow through, as Commissioner Val said, on what guidelines they needed to follow. Rewarded some, then penalized them for not doing it, and this, that, and the other. Whatever guidelines we give them, we need to make sure we follow it and stick to it throughout the whole process.
Amen.
I'll agree with that statement, but I've never seen us do that yet.
No.
But I tell you what, our first meeting is January the 9th. Why don't we, as a committee and individuals, why don't we think about this and ponder over this, just exactly what Commissioner Val and Commissioner Fritz talked about, and let's come up with and give everybody a fair shake. Mr. Meredith.
Mr. Chairman, if you see bullet number 4 under budget forms and worksheets, both of the things that Chuck and Shane are pointing out are already in Robbie's worksheet, which I assume the department heads get this.
They do. Yes.
So you've got both of those categories.
And even under the guidelines, it says capital outlay for equipment should not be budgeted in operational department budgets. And it says that, it said that last year. I mean, I agree with you. Both of you guys, yes. I mean, see, and that's what I'm saying, you guys set the guidelines. If that's what you want, then that's what we'll do.
That's what I said, we said it, but we know to
Right.
follow through that.
Right. And this is just a draft where any changes can be made in this or anything can be added. Normally, in the past, we brought it to the January meeting for approval. So
we've got over a month to look over this and come up with exactly what we want to do.
Cam?
And hopefully, with what Kim has been working on, especially with the HR committee and everything else, this thing, everybody doing things, different things on their own with the salaries will be taken care of with this here.
I would take a look at the calendar too, the full year calendar, the state gives us certain dates that we have to have things done by, and so on the calendar, all this meets those dates. If you have conflicts or anything, those dates can be changed as long as we meet the state requirements. I mean, we even mentioned last year, instead of, there's 3 dates in March, could do an all-day workshop or something and just do 1 date instead of 3 dates. I mean, it's up to the committee, but those are just some suggestions.
Well, I think from thinking about last year's budget committee, we got through it if we got through that year, we'll get through this year. We'll make it. We'll get there.
I agree. Well, and to complicate matters, this is a reappraisal year, so.
It's a what?
A reappraisal year, this coming budget season, so that
Well-
changes things too.
So if you could look to perhaps in March, give us a guesstimated date that perhaps we can meet for a full day, that would be great. Because there were meetings that we had this past year that were very long-winded, and by the time we left, the last thing you wanted to do was crunch numbers.
Right.
At least for me. I mean, because we were working on so much in such short timelines, that it may be better for us to have a full day where departments can come and go, and we can try to iron some bigger things out.
Well, May the 5th is our regular scheduled budget meeting, always the first Thursday. The 12th and the 26th are special called budget meetings, so.
March?
In March,
In
yes,
March,
ma'am.
the 12th and the 26th.
And I'm here every day, so, all day, so any day's good for me.
I know we have a conference coming up in that month. That's the spring conference for
Okay.
the commissioners.
Well, maybe by March, we'll have a pretty good
Yes.
handle on it. We'll have a good feel for what we have accomplished and what we need to accomplish. Any other comments on the budget calendar? Proceed, Mr. Robbie.
Okay.
Do we need to vote on it, or?
No, this was, I mean, if you had any changes you'd like to make, we can make those now, or we can wait and make them next month, it's fine.
Now, we're going to make them the 9th, the next, in January meeting, we'll make our changes and we'll adopt it, but we'll have 3 or 4 weeks to look over it and, because we don't want to make a motion today and then come back
That's
in
fine.
3 or 4 weeks and change it already. Any other comments? Mr. Robbie, go ahead.
All right, the next thing I have is the cash and fund balance report. Unassigned fund balance is at 4.7 million. The total fund balance is at 9 million. Cash is at 8.2 million, which continues, it's almost 2.5 million higher than last year at this time.
I've been chasing bugs all day. I gotta get my mind set on
It looks
this.
like this. It's like on the 6th or 7th page. It's actually,
Forget now.
Yeah.
15th page back. 16, 15, or 16.
Not in this one.
Okay, I printed mine online and it.
It's not in that version. This was one of those months where November fell, we weren't done balancing the time we had to send the agenda out, so it's kind of, I have to get this in.
Robbie, are these official numbers now?
They are audited now, yes, sir.
That don't require any action on our part.
No, it's just information purposes. Also included the sales tax, another month of it, which it continues.
Will December be our biggest sales month?
Well-
Sales tax collection month?
You would think that, but last year it was our lowest. And if you look at last year, it wasn't our lowest for of every month, but it went down 11% compared to December of 2017. So maybe more people do online ordering and stuff in December than actual shopping.
They said
Well, with the
last,
collecting sales tax from online, should it?
I thought it's supposed to go to your
Different, yeah.
address.
to the address that that the package gets delivered
Yeah.
to
don't
is
know
where
if
the
that
tax
started.
It'd be
dollars go.
interesting to see how, go ahead.
So I just included that for you all. Also included behind that, the EMS report, just to show where they were at each month. In November, they've spent 42, actually, the revenue, they've collected 42, almost 43% of the revenue, and they spent 41%, almost 42% in expenditures. So they're holding steady where there should be, actually.
So that's pretty normal, correct?
Yes.
Good.
Any questions, any thoughts, any comments? Go ahead, Mr. Robbins.
All right. Moving into the budget amendments, the consent agenda, pages 1 through 6.
Motion to second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the next is the schools from Julie Minton, pages 7 through 11.
I have a
Approve.
question.
Yes.
On page 9, there's an appropriation for $10,170 to appropriate the insurance proceeds for property damages at Clinton High School. The repairs are in progress, but not 100% completed. What happened?
I think what happened is we had someone who backed into a fence and hit a utility pole, and we received this money the end of June, and we had to set that money aside for the repairs to be made in this current fiscal year.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I don't have any more details, but that's
No, that's
pretty
good.
much what I
Clarifies pretty good.
know.
Any other comments? Mr. Fritz?
I had one question on number 8. How many motor vehicles do you get for the 100,000?
That's a good question.
I think what the plan is on that is there is to be 2 trucks for maintenance and a vehicle for technology, a van. This amount is not necessarily specific, it's just a good guesstimate of what we need for those vehicles. So I can't really tell you, sir. I just know that right now, Dr. Parrott is planning for two vehicles for the maintenance department and 1 for the technology department.
Just curious.
So,
Just said vehicles, so I'm just curious. how many.
yes, sir.
So
So-
a total of 3 then.
It's the purchase of the vehicles.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Move for approval as a group. then.
Second.
Motion to approve as a group, motion and second. Anybody got a question or discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, next up from the library, we have an appropriation, pages 12 and 13.
Motion?
Second.
Motion to second for 12 and 13. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Next up from our tourism department, we have another appropriation for $45,000 for an advertisement in Southern Living Magazine and an Anderson County Oak Ridge brochure, and the appropriation to 302-4000 is to implement the move to Anderson County marketing plan, which will include digital and print marketing.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? Ms. Stephanie, you want to talk about that any? Anybody, any discussion? Ms. Teresa?
The appropriation to Code 316 is for contribution to the city of Rocky Top to clean up property owned by the city, which will be used for ATV trailer parking, so that riders can access Winrock Park trails.
Yes.
Where is this property
Do you
located
know
roughly?
where the gas station right there at the intersection of 441 and 25 is? I think it used to be an Exxon, then there's a Marathon on the other corner.
Right.
If you drive straight through that intersection, it's back in there.
There's an old,
It's called A1.
yeah.
They refer to it as A1. It used to become a junkyard. The county actually owned part of it and gave it to the city. The city bought the other part of it. So their issue is cleanup. They can't get it cleaned up. And there's tons of tires that need to be hauled off and paid. They have people to haul them off, but they have to pay when they take them to the recycle center.
Well, the ATV trailer parking, is that overnight parking or is it
No,
just?
it's going to be day use. And so when we originally opened up the roads to be ridden on by ATVs, we took that property into consideration. So that road is in the state statute that you can ride ATVs on that road. So they'll come out of there onto 25 and then down to 116 and then up to the property.
Is this,
There's just not anywhere safe on that side of the
Sure.
property to park. You have people parking up at the end of, I always want to call it Dutch Valley. That's not it. To the end of the road right there off of 116. Help me out, Shane. I always want to call it Dutch Valley. It's not Dutch Valley.
Talking about Old Lake City Highway?
No, off of 116 up towards Val Mountain, but the
Beach
other,
Grove.
Beach Grove, thank you. I always want to call it that. But they're parking at the end of Beach Grove, and in some areas they shouldn't be parking. So this will just give visitors a place to park, to access that side of the property.
roughly how many vehicles are going to be able to park there?
It is probably 10 acres, so yeah, there's going to be quite a bit of access
You're
there.
gonna clear it and gravel it, I guess?
Yes, yes, sir.
Is it going to be secured?
No, it'll be park at your own risk.
Okay. Cool,
And this
thank
will
you.
be for trucks and their trailers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right, next up is an appropriation from EMA, Steve Payne, for $10,002.04 for revenue from Oak Ridge Reservation Community Alliance.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
And next up is an appropriation from EMS for $951, insurance recovery.
Got a motion and a second, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries, thank you.
Alrighty, and the last appropriation we have today is from solid waste, $17,000 from restricted for public health and welfare to engineering services.
Got a motion and a second, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries, thank you.
Okay, so we're moving into our sections part. Part A is the Anderson County Compensation Plan, which Ken Jeffers Whitaker will be here to discuss. She's already handed you all out.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good afternoon. I think y'all already have the packet. Looks like this. It's kind of what we're going to be discussing. This looks like what we looked at last meeting in November, but the sections that are in red are the items that we want to look at. You'll notice that per budget committee request last month, the EMS submitted the current pay scale being utilized in the updated format at the HR Advisory Committee meeting in November. The committee had no disagreement with the usage of the updated format. That page, you all seen it last month, but it's at the end. It's like at page 7 and 8 in your packet that you've got right there. So today what we're doing is requesting approval and/or guidance from the Budget Committee on the attached EMS pay scale. Please note that this in no way increases or decreases EMS staff members' current rate of pay. This is simply taking what is already being submitted to payroll for their salaries, what Nathan uses as a guide, and this is put into a format that mimics that of the sheriff's office.
Ms. Teresa?
So it's only what's in red is what's going to be solidified?
What is in red on this is what we're talking about. We're going to take them one step at a time, yes. So the first one is about the EMS department.
And again, none of these numbers are changing from what the folks are getting paid at this time.
That is correct. It's the current rate of pay, and the pay scale that he's already utilizing is just putting it in the format that matches the SO, so it'll be consistent.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next section is in reference to Exhibit 5C, that's pages 2 through 4. This was submitted during the HR Advisory Committee meeting in November as well. The committee approved Exhibit 5C as the minimum, midpoint, and maximum update by unanimous vote. Requesting approval from this body for Exhibit 5C is the Anderson County's government's updated compensation plan. It includes all general increases. All the general increases are as the commission-approved increases since the 2008 compensation plan was passed, so it's not changing any of those salaries, but it's putting them in a minimum, midpoint, and maximum plan.
I like this ideal. But in 2008, we adopted a plan. I think we've done it 1 year.
Well, again, this doesn't change any of the salaries that's being paid currently. Nobody's getting an increase or a decrease. What it does is it takes that 20-step pay scale and puts it into an easier document that can be utilized, which is, looks like this.
In your professional opinion, can we go forward with this and stick to this?
So in the STEP plan, what I think you find is that there is an expectation of moving from step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, based upon years of service. And this removes that. There is no step. There's a minimum, midpoint, and max. This does give your elected officials the ability to move within this, which makes it easier to utilize for them, as well as removing that expectation. Now, does that mean that they're not going to ask for increases? That's not what that means. There's got to be a plan in place. That's the narrative portion, and that's up next on the list.
Has all the department heads bought into this? I mean,
Yes, the HR Advisory Committee
You
is
said
made up.
unanimous.
And it's made up of your elected officials.
Any more
Yes.
discussion? Motion?
Motion to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion?
I mean, where I work, this is what we did. We have grades, and then within that grade, you have ranges.
Yes.
And in order to get from this grade to that grade, you have to meet these qualifications. or-
It seems very professional, and I appreciate your effort in this.
Thank you.
I just hope that we will, for the employee's sake, I hope that we can be more professional about their pay and what they can expect and when they can expect it. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. On page 6, down there in the red, you're going to see at my request and also Budget Committee's approval, the 2008 compensation plan narrative that was on page 5 and 6, and it's in blue, the narrative portion. That is the portion that went to the HR Advisory Committee in November, and it was deferred to our next HR Advisory Committee. It is the portion that's going to take some time to build. It's going to have to be updated because it speaks to steps and levels, and to make sure that it is utilized across the board is the goal. So there's going to take some work on that, but I'll be back with that portion.
Okay?
Okay?
Well, Kim, let me ask you something. Are you keeping track of who is in what grade and monitoring? Will you be able to monitor that department? Not tell them what to do, but keep an eye on it to keep someone from saying, hey, I can get you to the next level. All you gotta do is sign here.
Yeah.
And they don't meet those specific qualifications.
I think that's going to start with the narrative. I think that's why it's so important that we put that in place. That gives the payroll clerk as well as HR a guide, as well as your elected officials a guide on how you get to that.
Right.
You know, even EMS, Nathan is currently working on his narrative to support his 20-step. The SO is the only one that has that full-fledged, you got your compensation plan and your narrative that goes with it that makes up what their goals are and how they give those increases. And of course, the goal of this is to get to that point, to where we have all of that.
Mr. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand why Teresa asked that question. I really do, but one thing I would caution us in full commission on is the goal, the role of the Human Resources Department. They are advisory. They are not regulatory. I would caution us on trying to put HR in the middle of any issues that may come up in the future as far as coming and telling us, hey, this department head, you know, they're doing this or they're doing that. I don't think that's the function that HR has, and I don't think that's the function HR wants. I don't blame them for not wanting that, but they are a good advisory group to the department heads, and I would caution us on letting them continue to do that.
Appreciate that statement, yeah. Yeah, Ms. Teresa?
Well, and it's not to say that you would police them, but somebody has to keep track of the records.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, and I do keep track of those.
The system that we have where I work, if I take a class, I submit that certificate. It goes into my file electronically, so that when my boss comes along and says, oh, she deserves to be bumped, there is no, you know, anyone coming forward saying, oh, she got it because she's a buddy. No, look at the folder. Here's where the qualifications for that bump up were met.
So one of the
And
things.
HR simply it houses that information.
Correct. And that's one of the things that we do when the supervisor turns in a change of status, whether that's an increase, a promotion, a demotion, a termination, whatever that is, we're asking for supporting documentation. And there is, like Shane said, I cannot require them to submit that, but I request that. And I haven't found any of the elected officials not submit that
Good.
information.
Good, that's good to hear.
And then that goes in the
So the elected
employee
officials
policy.
are the supervisors?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
I don't know if we have a motion, do we?
No, not yet.
Then I need a motion, I'm sorry.
I think she said she was going to come back
I'll come back with that.
when she's
Okay.
completed it.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we're not ready for that one yet. So the last item I want to talk about, in the email I had sent out, it was under D, and it was a discussion of a third-party pay audit. After speaking with various elected officials, including some of the commissioners, it's my understanding that the basis for reaching out to an independent third party to conduct a pay analysis is due to the HR staff being among those being looked at. We are on the compensation plan. So to remain, I'm trying to think of what word I would use, impartial, to remain impartial, to display that fairness across the board to the staff, that that has been brought to my attention, that is an option that we would like to look at. So what I've done is I've reached out to various companies to get some quotes. I've sat down with Catherine Ashmery, also spoke to the HR Advisory Committee. It was part of the topic during that meeting. I think Robbie included that in your minutes as well. To approach Budget Committee to discuss what's most helpful to Commission in reference to a comp plan pay audit. So bringing it to your attention, what that would look like as far as cost goes, it's $4,990. It's a proactive pay equity audit by a team that I have been in contact with since October. I'd contacted another group in June. They actually utilized the Biddle Company. They removed themselves as a go-between to help us reduce costs, to get the cost down to the $4,990. This speaks a bit to what they do. I think it's probably the last two sheets that you have that is their actual submission of a quote. The first portion of it is based upon EEO and civil rights, Title VI, Title VII. So it's based upon gender and race, the first portion of the audit. The second and last portion, third portion is legitimate factors like experience, degrees, certifications, and also they take into effect our grouping of job factors. So they would look at all clerk ones across the board, all directors across the board. So it would be various, it'd be a lot of information, a lot of data. And the question is, do you feel like this data would be helpful in determining any disparity or pay inequalities that we may have?
Discussion, question. I'm not for spending the 5,000 unless you really think it's necessary.
There's a couple of, there's another quote in here for pay scale. Most of us have heard of pay scale. It's a pretty big firm. That quote's $12,000. So I am not in favor of that.
Good.
But if
What will
you,
they do, what will this $5,000 do for us that you can't, that your office can't do other than the fact of just making you impartial? You couldn't do that appraisal and be impartial even though it's your office, your salary, your staff?
yes,
You couldn't do that professional to where that there wouldn't be no questions?
I can do that. Yes, sir. I think the fear is that the way it would look and the way people may feel about it after the fact.
The people, who are you talking about?
Employees. Employees as well as citizens maybe, but probably employees more so. And you know, this committee as well as commission need to be comfortable
All right,
with
thank
that.
you. Commissioner Fritz.
Anything we do, along with this or anything else, is only as good as as much as the commission itself supports it and backs it. As you said, back in 2008, we did the compensation plan, and we went 1 year, and that was it. And that's all came about, and that's all it did. Of course, we cannot say what other commissions will do.
That's correct.
We can say we're going to do this, and then 2 more years from now, the next commission may do something totally different and may go a different direction. I mean, I'm all for trying to do something, but, you know, you don't know when it comes up to a point where we're going to do a raise or we're going to have a tax increase. Well, we ain't going to do a tax increase. How many times over the years have we gave bonuses or gave an insurance thing or done this, that, and the other to offset doing a raise? And so it all depends on, you know, what this commission will do. And if we could spend $5,000 and be for naught, because then we as a commission turn around and not do nothing. So again, it's going to rely on what all 16 of us here on this bench does, and what we how we back it, and how much support we give to this, and how committed we are. Are we willing to raise taxes if need be to give the employees a raise to stay current with the compensation plan?
Very seldom have we been willing to do that.
No, very, very seldom.
Mr.
Just kind of the same thing Commissioner Fritz was talking about. I don't think I'd be willing to spend the money right now because I don't believe that we have the money to give raises. And if we don't have the money to give raises, it doesn't do us any good to spend this money on this. You know, if we had money laying around, if we hadn't just raised taxes and we had money laying around, it'd be different. But as we went through the budget process last year, I didn't see any extra money laying around.
Okay, thanks, sir. Mr. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chuck and Denver kind of echo what I was going to say, but I attended the last HR meeting when this was brought up. The questions I have is, we pay this company this money, they're going to obtain information to tell us how our salaries that we pay our employees compare to other counties.
We
No,
don't
this is
care
an
about that.
internal. It's an internal pay audit to look for
From-
pay
from
inequalities
department
among
to
our own
department.
staff.
Okay.
Yes.
If it's not a comparison, I really don't see where a benefit is going to come from this when one department head can call the other department head and already obtain the information. I'm not for this at this time either, maybe later on down the road, but I don't really see where this is going to benefit us that much. And if I'm wrong, I've been wrong before, I'll certainly listen to an explanation, but I don't really see where this would benefit us at this point.
So some of the discussion that got us to where we are today in the spring was bringing to the attention of this body that there is some pay inequalities in Anderson County. Those pay inequalities, if they are a true disparity, meaning that it is affecting those of a protected class, that spending $5,000 or spending funding to increase any that may be in that disparity level would in turn save money in the long run. Because if we are ever brought to the carpet, called to the carpet on this, it could cost Anderson County a lot of money.
So another way maybe to determine whether or not we had some issues that we need to address, could the department heads find this information out on their own to ensure that they weren't having employees that had a disparity, and then they try to fix it themselves?
So what's been done already is that HR, I have taken large Excel spreadsheet and done just that. I've compared clerk ones across the board. I've compared clerk twos across the board. Whatever the titles are, those have been compared, okay? And I've met with each of the department heads, the elected officials on those, asking the questions, is there a reason? There can always be extenuating circumstances, meaning, let's say I may be a clerk two, but I'm in a probationary period, so I'm still making clerk one pay and haven't made it to clerk two yet until that probationary period's up and I've proven myself. So there's been those type of discussions already. So knowing that there is a disparity or that there are some issues, we've known that for a bit now. It's just, how do we want to go about correcting those? How do we want to handle those? How does this body, as well as commission, want to move forward in correcting those?
Well, I guess my question to that question, Kim, would be, so far, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that sounds like not a legislative branch of government's concern at this point, but an executive branch of government's concern at this point. The department heads, I think, are the first ones to try to solve this problem. If it's eventually going to come down to an overall budget increase, then I get it. That's where we come into play. But I would love to hear from each department head themselves saying, HR came to us, they explained this problem to us, we have looked at this problem, we have come up with various answers, and this is what we need in order to fix the problems. Instead of us paying this money to have an outside group to come in and do this study and then come back and tell us. Now, this is Shane's opinion. It starts with the individual department heads.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Question, comment.
Yes.
I hear what you're saying, Shane, but I think that it's important that HR does get this sort of assistance. And I say that because we've had elected officials that have dished out pay raises because they could. And as a result, it fell to an imbalance within the county. We've got some folks that aren't making what they should because the elected official or the department head that is in there now is what he's working with, what was handed to him. But we had some elected officials that just kind of dished it out. And I think HR getting assistance from a third party would allow not only kind of like an internal audit to say, this is how you classify and these people should be falling in those different sectors, but it would
give the department heads, help me here, you know where I'm going with this. It would give them something to follow.
Yes.
Something more substantial to follow.
Okay, with all this being said,
One quick question.
go.
If we voted to do this, would this prevent an elected official from dishing out raises just however they feel?
Now, that's going to take some
Right.
changes to the narrative portion, and I feel like if that's what this body as well as commission wants, it's probably actually even going to take some changes to the finance policy and procedures.
And also, just to clarify, this is not going to correct those disparities. It's just going to make them public for everyone else to see, correct? Because we still
Well-
have to come up with the money.
You're going to have to come up with the money, yes.
Right.
So far, and even with this company or any of the companies that I've spoken to, you're not going to turn over and say, hey, this is Kim Whitaker, she's a director in HR, and this is what she makes, and this is her degree. It's going to say employee X. And she's a director. It's not going to tell them even what department I'm in. So it breaks that down to where the person that is navigating this, which would be the HR department, would have that knowledge on the backside. Absolutely. I would know who that is when I get that report back. But it would not be in that status.
I just think $4,900 may save us from getting a lawsuit slapped on us because this one held their hand out and got a wad of money, and this one didn't get enough.
Robbie, where will this money come from? I need a motion to vote this up or vote it down.
I'm going to make a motion to vote it up.
I got a motion to vote to approve the $4,990 for a consulting firm. I got a motion. I need a second. I got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
2 ayes? Is that what I hear? 2 ayes? 3 ayes? No. Got 3 ayes for it. Who's against it? 1, 2, 3. 3's against it. I don't even know if the chair ought to vote.
You voted for.
Well, but I'm not for it.
You could abstain, but it'd be the same result.
Well, I vote against it too. So make your pitch in 3 or 4 more minutes and let's talk about it and we'll vote again. Sell me. Oh, wait a minute. Mayor, what do you think about this?
Kim moved out of the way and he spotted you.
Is that unfair to put you on the spot?
Well, I think there's value in it, but I'm more concerned about value in a comparison of other like positions. And so kind of to Commissioner Waddell's point, I think we can get an internal audit, but I think knowing what people in the fields, like for instance, Oak Ridge, and that's a much more expensive study. Oak Ridge did a full survey and they were able to identify these people have already maxed out for their industry. And, you know, if you're going to do, like the county does, a 2% raise or 1% raise, these individuals are identified, they're not on the playing field for a raise because here's what we found. They're already maxed out. So to me, that's where more value is in identifying those disparities. Doing an internal audit is just going to be of Anderson County, but
I see it as being a first step, Mayor. I mean, perhaps we can go to a full-blown, what is it, across all of East Tennessee or across the United States, but I think as a first step, at least to get some of this in line, that would be a good start.
unless somebody's planning a lawsuit, then it's you're paying to do the work for them. I mean, I'm being pro-con on it. I mean,
right.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So, yeah.
Thank you. We can either re-vote and see if anybody's changed their mind, or we can
Sorry, I
send,
may have just opened a can of worms.
or we can send it to full commission without a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman,
I'd be against that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then where do we want to go from here?
We voted no. I mean, but
No.
it failed.
Okay,
I'm ready to move on.
all right, let's move on.
So if I could get some guidance from this body on, other than the narrative portion, at some point, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Remind me, Kim, when HR discussed this issue, what was their final decision on recommending anything to us and/or full commission?
Are you talking about the audit portion?
Yes.
It was to bring it back next month.
Okay.
To let them talk about it.
Let's let the HR committee, the fine HR committee that we have with Commissioner Yeager, let's let them discuss this further, Mr. Chairman, and do the heavy lifting on it, and they can come back and tell us what they would like for us to try to do.
So be it.
Okay. Thank y'all.
Thank you, ma'am. ESG project.
Yes, sir. During the last commission meeting, some members of the budget committee felt they weren't as informed about the ESG project, and they wanted some more information, so I put it on the agenda. In the section B, you will find a summarized financial impact of both the base and complete project done by ESG. And I've also included a page titled ESG Project Financing. It takes ESG savings projections along with Cumberland Securities preliminary bond plan and gives you 3 different scenarios, like the best possible, medium, and the worst possible scenario. So I know ESG has 2 representatives here, and Scott Gibson's here with Cumberland Securities to answer any questions that this committee may have. I think they even have a slideshow if we wanted to see that.
Mr. Chairman, the Operations Committee had, I guess it was almost an hour-and-a-half presentation and slideshow. They did come prepared, if you all want to do that. I think that was also distributed via the minutes, operations minutes. They weren't in color, and you kind of missed some of what that would do for the Jolly Building. But they are here and prepared to answer questions, do a presentation, whatever you want. It's the will of the
Pleasure of the
committee.
commission. Sir? Okay.
And this is Mr. Nelson, if you would like to, I don't know if you, I don't think you got to speak at full commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
in our long discussion at the full commission meeting, it wasn't about what this could do for the county. It was basically how it was going to be funded and how we was going to go about paying for it all. And so I think that was the most, what the full commission was wanting, and maybe this committee and the finance committee to bring back to the whole body is, the funding mechanism and how this could be accomplished. And so that's probably the most thing that we would probably be more interested in.
It's on the finance committee agenda for Monday,
It is,
right?
yes. And Scott will be also at the finance committee meeting Monday.
Do we want to ask questions in, or do we want to talk about financing, or do we want to wait on the finance committee? Commissioner Val?
I've had the privilege of meeting with these individuals and discussing some issues, some advancements, some repairs, some benefits that they could give us. I agree with Chuck, that's not in dispute whether or not we should go with them. It's just the funding for that project. Now, if finance has this on their agenda, are they going to be discussing possible funding sources, or will that still come to the budget committee for discussion?
It's finance committee.
Okay, all right.
What'd you say, Rick?
It'd be the finance
Yes.
committee's decision.
If it's all going to be on the finance committee to come up with options for the funding, then I'd be set with letting them recommend how we're going to do it, because that's the only concern I got. And I think that's what Chairman Wandell's concern was. Rightfully so, I understand the concern, but if we can get that settled, that's really the only concern I had.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the only thing on the finance committee's agenda, isn't it?
Right now, yes. And I think,
No point in debating it twice.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Other comments? Denver?
No, sir.
Teresa? Rick? Chuck? Then we thank you guys for coming, but we're gonna go on to the next. Senior Center update, Mayor Frank. And we'd invite all the members of the Budget Committee to be there if we can.
What time is that? 4:30?
3:30 Monday.
3:30?
Bye, Sheriff.
That's all I got.
You're not gonna say anything?
I got a Christmas party to get to.
Well, escort us all down there.
I'll keep an eye on what's happening up here.
Well, save us a little food.
Okay.
Okay, so I've handed out a couple of master sheets with just some light reading there on costs. So one of the things, the main things we were looking at with the Armory is we had a very generous offer of $1 a year for the particular lease there at the Armory. But there were some upgrades and improvements that were needed, and the city manager was also to negotiate what an agreement with Anderson County would look like. That agreement, if we choose to accept that and move into the facility, would be, in discussing it with the city manager of Clinton, would be an agreement similar or structured like the agreement with the Anderson County School System when we occupied that facility, and then also Roane State, which is a 50-50 on maintenance and capital improvements. If there were major things that went wrong, then those would be negotiated on a case-by-case basis, but with an underlying assumption that it would be a 50-50 share. Some of the, I put in here some of the costs that would be of interest on the utility. This is, the Armory is a large facility, so I'm going by the contractor who went in to look at what we would need to upgrade it with what the city needs, which is a new roof, HVAC. I've listed the renovations there that were part of the contractor assessment. Partial replacement in some of the exterior windows and exterior doors, which would also make those doors ADA compliant. Renovate the bathrooms for ADA accessibility. And then the soft cost of those improvements, such as your design fees, your architectural fees. Those costs are low at $1,012,000. That's there at the bottom of that page one. And then the high end of $1,442,906. And that's from Studio 4 Design. Now, in talking, it came in a little bit more than I think anyone had expected. And in talking with the city manager, if we do choose to enter into that agreement, he would need to go back to the city of Clinton to make sure that they would be willing to do that 50-50. So that would be the cost there to improve the facility. The other issue is, that I thought was worth comparing, was the utility bill. And what I did is look from 2016 through now. And, well, when I pulled the numbers, so the last month they were available. So that was October of 19. So just on average, you're looking at a monthly bill of $1,580 in utility costs. So you're high. What I did was just look at that, putting that on a spreadsheet. Royden in purchasing helped with that. Putting that on a spreadsheet, you have a high of $2,700 and a low of $734. And most of those highs appear over the summer months. And then your water is, water and sewer's less than $30. I mean, that's just an eyeball it. I didn't actually average that out, but looked at the highs and lows there. So then on the back page, I did the kind of my own general pros and cons. I think the main, in terms of pro and con, I have it listed on both. It's not an asset, so it is a pro in that regard, in that you don't have to ever consider replacement costs, and you don't own the facility. And if we decide that something goes wrong and we don't want to invest in the repair, then we walk away. We vacate the facility. So there is a little bit of freedom there. But also, I have that listed as a con, because if we do invest in capital improvement costs, then we're investing in a facility that we do not own.
We're committed, yeah.
And so it's essentially a lease payment. So I have that on both sides. And I can read through those, or if you, for the people at home, or if you are just fine reading through those yourself, we can skip over to the Faith Promise one. Or we can just, if you want to ask questions on this one first, you can see it is a large facility. We do not need that large of a facility. And the only reason that comes into play, it would not even matter. It just gives us room for expansion. The reason it's relevant here is in utility costs, because you're basically going to be paying for utilities for space that you're not using. So,
Teresa?
Thanks. Mayor, and you're right, that's twice the size of the property over at the church. On your list of cons, you said don't own the asset, investments made will not be owned by the county. Well, that's kind of what our volunteer fire departments do right now. Where the county owns that property, but it's up to them to keep up the roof and put the new windows on. So, I mean, I think, although I see it as a point, I don't see it as a sticking point.
right.
But it is twice the size of the Faith Promise property. And even at one time, there was the property in Andersonville, which was how many thousands of square feet?
I think it was 10,000 square feet.
Yeah. I think that they would have more of an ease of utilizing the property that the city is offering. I mean, you can say they've got concrete floors, that's fine. I mean, we've got concrete floors.
Well, those are actually, and that, to me, and this is my sticking point, and I mentioned this to commissioners that were there. Whether we do nothing, whether we purchase Faith Promise, it's looking like a $500,000 investment
Right.
to move into this facility as well, and we won't own it. But to me, from a safety standpoint, this is concrete, but that is concrete that has been there
Sure,
for many decades, that was built for an armory,
sure.
for tanks. And when I go in there, and as somebody who worked in a daycare center, very similar, children falling, I'm just not comfortable. This is just my personal sticking point. When I walk in, I don't want seniors in there on walkers going down, because when they go down, something's going to break. And they do fall. They fall. We have many falls at our existing facility. And so that's my own, no one else has said that, nobody else who's taken a tour, that's just me.
There's concrete all around us. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to put it down to where exactly is concrete, it's at my house too.
Yep.
I mean, it's everywhere you go. But I'm looking at it from a viewpoint of how much space is there? And the armory's got 17,000 square feet. I really doubt that they're going to need that much space, but I'm also looking at the fact that the property over on Mariner Point Drive is the same property that Commissioner McCamey was pointing us to at one time to say, look at all this land over there, and we can sell a portion of this, and we can have a garden and walking paths, and went on and on. And we said no back then as well.
Well, what we were looking at then was the property that was actually in front of the in front of the facility. And so we were looking at constructing a facility
Right.
on that land. And at that time, they were wanting around $200. And I remember that very well because we actually got it was actually Commissioner Yeager who did a motion to defer for 60 days. So we had done that. And then what happened in the interim during those 60 days was the purchase of another facility. So we weren't looking at the church wasn't even on the radar at that time.
But of the 6.65 acres, you've got a note on the pro, extra acreage can be sold or used by the county for additional purpose. How much is considered extra acreage?
Okay, what happened is the church, when they originally went to that location, had 3 acres. That, whatever that is in that parcel there, that first one, you probably have access better than I do. I don't know that I... And then what happened is somewhere along the line, there is a large parcel of land. And I think you had a Publix or something that was looking at...
I just know it was a grocery store.
Someone was looking at that piece of land, but they had easement issues. And so what they did is that owner negotiated with the church for some easement on the edge of the church property. And they gave them, I think, some funding and then 3 of their acres to add to that church parcel. And so that's why I said it's an addition. It still has a separate legal description. And so when I asked the appraiser to look at it, I said, we know it's all together, it's 6 acres, but go ahead and appraise that separately since you do have a separate, parcel survey and legal description.
Okay.
And so that was the only reason. And that's how they obtained that land. They did not divide it themselves or look to sell it off. They acquired it midway along their path of ownership,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Sure.
Any other questions? Mr. Denver?
I'm not a contractor, but I don't know if I'm understanding what you're saying. Are you saying that 6 inches of concrete is not as hard as 12 inches of concrete? Because I think if a person falls on 6 inches of concrete, it's gonna hurt just as bad as 12 inches. I don't think thickness has anything to do with it.
Well, concrete does get harder as it ages.
I understand,
so,
but
yeah.
if I fell on too weak concrete, it's gonna hurt just as bad as if I fell on 10-year-old concrete. But my question is, and I believe, I wasn't a commissioner at the time, but I believe hearing kind of the same thing about the 205 main building as far as the electric. We're comparing a building right now that's not being used to a building that is being used every day. So I think that, we got some estimates on the building at 205 Main before, and the estimates were a lot lower than what the electric bill ended up being, and that was because the prior group was shutting the electricity off during the night, and I'm certain that the building here in Clinton, the Armory, I'm certain they've got a lot of equipment and everything in there, so I'm certain they're leaving the heat and air conditioning running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this group, this building at Faith Promise, it's not being used right now. They may have it shut down lower. It may not be being used as much as the seniors will be using it. So that's just my little 2 cents, just to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Good thought.
And I did look at that, Commissioner. That's why I went back to 2016. So, and if you look at the months that they first occupied, I am happy to send all of that backup data to you. So, for instance, when they first moved in and they weren't really using it, I would expect those numbers to probably be more in line with what current use for, a senior center would be. But also, they're not in there at certain times, and you can see that, for instance, in the winter months where they're out on holidays and they don't have students in there and they're not working. You see those actual fluctuations in the utility bills. So, and I'm happy to send all that out. I just was trying to do you a nice summary sheet and look at the average over those 3 years, so.
The area, I was late getting there because I had to pick my son up at school, but I did get to look at the Armory. The area, like, I guess it would be the classroom area, not the, out in the gymnasium, area. So the area where the classroom stuff, do you know the square footage on that?
Well,
'Cause
I know.
it seemed like it was larger than actually what they have now. And I was just curious on a scale of the area that they're using now compared to the classroom area and the area that that they would be using during the fair time and stuff, see if there was a comparison.
Well, I can tell you, the main room for, I put it in there, the main activity area is 7,300 square feet. So the remaining rooms in the building, whether that's, an office or classroom or storage area or bathrooms. So if we're looking at a 17,000 square foot
10,000.
facility, it's 90,
Right. So.
9,700 left or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there would be plenty of room for them to utilize that area during the fair time then? 'Cause I looked at it, I was rather impressed with it. It's very nice in there, and I honestly have a hard time seeing where it's gonna be a low end of 1 million and a high end of almost 1.5 million to get that building in shape. I mean, I looked at it, and it looks great back there in the classrooms. Looks excellent. So, I would be interested to see, what upgrades that y'all think that the Armory does need
Well,
to equal.
that's the city of
1.5.
Clinton. I can't go in, like, for instance, I had an inspection done for Faith Promise, but I cannot go in and inspect the city structure. Those construction numbers are from the city of Clinton, so they engaged Studio 4 Design to look at the issues. So for instance, I don't know if you got to go back to the classrooms, but
did.
all of the ceiling tiles they're all bowed and sagging because of the moisture from the leak in the roof. And so the roof is one of the things they put on their
Right.
agenda. They knew that ADA would need to be done for the bathroom, so they're looking at the ADA. They did not include in their construction estimate, because this isn't an interest of the city, but we would need kitchen, which, would be some cost, but there is water in that back area if we wanted to put the kitchen back there. But this is their number from their architectural firm. This isn't the mayor or the senior center's
Okay.
construction estimate. These are their construction estimates.
Do you know what all was included?
I put a summary for you there that is, now, the one thing that they did put in there, because since we can't put tile or carpet or anything on that master room, we would have to grind. There are divots all in that main room, that concrete. They did do grind and polish that floor to even all of that out, because you couldn't have walkers hitting that and going down.
Why couldn't we put carpet down?
Because they want to continue to use it for the fair, and that's not, they said it had to remain concrete.
So Mayor Burton would have the whole deal for this 1 million or almost $5 million upgrade?
Yes.
He would have it,
yes.
okay, I'll contact him again, because
I
that just
actually
seems,
have
that
it.
seems outrageous to me. And I'm not gonna be interested in spending another 1.5.
Well, I have it and I can send it. So it's
Perfect.
all based on square footage. They have all of their costs broken down. There are a couple things in there that we don't need in order to get in there, but we would need a kitchen, so.
Okay, thank you.
I I do have one quick question. What is the square footage of the facility that they're in right now?
I cannot recall. I want to say it's 2,400 square feet, something, 26.
26, 24?
Question,
Oh, I didn't know you were here, Sheree.
Mr. Fritz?
It's just a few comments I just want to make. One thing, if you go to the armory, especially if you're during the dead winter, the windows in that armory are probably the original windows in that place. I replaced the windows in the house here just recently, and I mean, you go up there and you just feel the draft coming through those windows. I mean, it's just unreal how cold inside the building it will get just because of those windows. But if you're talking $500,000 for a building down here, so very close to $500,000 to $721,000 for a building up here that will be fixing up a building that belongs to the city and it won't be ours. $500,000 down here that we could sell land and recoup some of the money for and make it even cheaper than that. And then time you sell the the Main Street property up here, it's gonna be even that much cheaper. I'm sorry, I mean, the amount of work that you're gonna have to do to the property up there at the Armory, it's almost like a no-brainer that that building that Faith promised, I mean, that's a steal.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. Val?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, do you know how much the electric bills and the water sewer bills are at the current facility that they're in now? Or Sheree maybe know?
I think they run $450 to $650 a month, kind of, there might be some, kind of like here, I put a high-low. You might
Okay.
have an exceptional low month or an exceptional high month in
Okay.
a July. I think September, when I looked at everybody's, whether it was Faith Promise or the Armory, it was record-setting. So,
And
is that right, Sheree?
And just to make sure we're on the same page, what is the funding source for them to pay those bills each month? Where's that money coming from?
It comes from their grant, and so it would require additional funds if we did occupy the Armory in order to pay those bills.
Okay. And that was kind of what I was wondering. But now, would that be the concern at either facility? I mean, the bills are obviously going to go up, I'm assuming, especially electric bill, because you're going into a larger facility.
I'm looking at the average for the Mariner Point being about 817. So I've got to run Sheree's numbers. I mean, it's going to be up some, obviously, because she's in a 2,400
Right.
square foot facility.
Right.
But, I mean, that's not a lot more
Okay.
for that much more space.
So it would actually be a cheaper electric bill at the Mariner Point facility. Regardless, if it goes up, would that still be covered within the grant?
I believe we can handle that.
Okay. Because my next question was going to be, if costs do go up at either one of the facilities, I wanted to make sure that the funding source would still be there in order to cover that, and if not, where would we get the money to do
Right.
that?
Right.
Okay.
Good point.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
This is good discussion, but what I'd like to do is get some kind of an idea if you want to vote on one of these today, or if you want to send this to full commission where it'll have to end up anyway, or what's the pleasure?
Are you asking for a vote on this tonight, Mayor?
Well, I know this came here, and then I think it's also been at Operations Committee, so I plan to take this to Operations Committee as well. Oh, no, that's okay. No, go ahead.
Before I took a vote on anything, I would definitely like to explore funding options. I mean, I know that Commissioner Fritz said, you know, we can sell 205 Main, but we've sold it twice, and we still have it. And you know, the commission's got to get together and figure out where we're getting the money for any of it before we vote on anything. obviously, the armory, we don't have to look for money where we're gonna buy it, but we still have some costs that, for upgrades that's gonna have to take place. So for me personally, I'm not ready to vote on anything until we explore it all and find a funding mechanism. And as a commission, decide if we are gonna sell 205 Main, because, we're not gonna get our full investment back out of it. And we're gonna have to accept a loss. And I think that's something that this commission's gonna have to come together on and figure it out. I'm not ready to own two buildings right now at this point in time.
I understand. I think we've all come up with the conclusion that we're gonna take a loss on 205. We're gonna take a loss. I mean, I don't see no way out of that.
Mayor, and I'd like to ask that you ask Scott Burton actually to come, whether it's to commission and/or us, to explain those numbers.
Maybe we can get him to operations where you're gonna take it again, the same package, right?
Because I too am not willing to vote on anything right now.
Wait.
That's all right, go ahead.
I saw the email, but I hadn't had a chance to look at it. What was the appraisal of the Faith Promise?
Well, the appraisal documents are for you all, and it's just under contractual obligations. It's not a public.
Oh, you can't discuss it.
Yes, but it is well worth the $500,000 we're offering, and it would actually address a loss on 205. So I can say this, if you look at the Anderson County website, it is valued at over $1 million. If you had to build it, it would be over $1 million. And then you have depreciation, and you have about 35 years of economic life left on the Faith Promise facility. So that gives you an idea of it is, well, I mean, they've made it clear that they're offering it well below value because they want to help us, and they want to partner with the program in the community.
So we could be
And they wanna get
recouping
rid of
our
it, too.
loss.
Yes, we
on-
can.
Commissioner Val.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too agree with Teresa. I would like to have Mayor Burton, if he would be able to come to a meeting. If it's gonna be at operations, that's fine with me. If not here, to actually have a good dialogue with him. I know he's been real good about talking to commissioners individually. Appreciate him doing that. He showed up at the day we toured each facility. But to actually get in a public meeting and have these conversations, to hear straight from him, the city entering into an agreement with us to do this together in the future, if we decide to go that route, I'd love to be able to have that conversation. So I like that idea.
Okay. Any other discussion? You going to do is the pros and cons on Faith Promise, or are we through? or-
Sure. On Faith Promise, you're looking at an average monthly utility bill of $817. Same on water and sewer is about $30 a month. The pros and cons are both owning the asset. The purchase price is less than the appraised value and substantially less than the cost to build. The extra acreage can be sold, or it can be used by the county for an additional purpose. It is move-in ready, where, again, on the Armory, we don't have when that would be. Something to think about that we did talk about, several of the commissioners talked about as we were in the room at the Faith Promise, is the way it's set up, because since it was set up as a church, it could be used as a government facility for meetings. And you already have all the media connections. You have the raised platform in the center at the back for TV, for instance. So if you did want to have a commission meeting there, you could do that. You could create that environment in there very easily. Or for public hearings, or there's really not a lot of meeting space in the courthouse. So that is something that you could do. I've already raised the point under the pros, but the size meets the needs, and you're not paying additional utilities for unused space. So the cons, again, if you consider it a con to own the asset, future capital maintenance and replacement costs. Location is further from the north end of Anderson County. And there is a kitchen, but ideally, it would be good, your appraisal has a lot of pictures in there of the facility. It would be good to move that wall, which the design of the building makes that very easy. There's no load-bearing walls in that building. Walls are easily moved. So that's the pros and cons on that.
Okay.
And I'm happy to put together a proposal, if you like, on how to fund it. And I think, you know, on the front end, initially, yes, you would have to make some investment, but that investment could be recouped on the back end by the sale of 205.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Any other questions? Any direction for the mayor? We'll come to operations Monday night and hear this proposal again. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other thing to come before this budget committee? We're dismissed. Thank you. Adjourned. Thank you, Mayor.